See ya. How y'all doing today?
All right.
What's life like for y'all right now?
Day by day, bro.
Yeah?
Yeah, trying to make this time go by, you know what I'm saying?
How long have you been in the system?
Like when I first got locked up, that's what you meant?
Yes, sir.
So I was 12. Then just since 12 to 17 now, locked up like 8, 9 times. I missed the last 3 Christmases just being locked up on Christmas. I won't. Like just on Christmas, I'm always locked up on Christmas, so.
I was 15 years old. Just like 5 years before I believed in Santa Claus. Like, I mean, I'm going on 3 years. And I got 50 more, to be honest. I got 50 more years to do. So it ain't, yeah, I got a while left. But I'm gonna try to turn it around. I'm gonna find a way to turn it around somehow. I don't know.
What's up with you, sister?
My first time being incarcerated, I was about 14. I've been in and out ever since then. The most recent charge I caught, when I was 16, they tried me as an adult. Growing up in my household was different. Sometimes no lights, no water, no food, so I turned to the streets for real. And the streets got me, but now they don't got me no more. But I'm supposed to go to DLC today.
How long you gonna be in DLC for?
I had 33 years total. They suspended 18. I did 3 up here, but they ain't count, so.
You have 33 years?
Yeah.
You caught your first charge at what, 13, 14?
Yeah, like 13, 14.
And the gun charges, the robbery, and the Grand Theft Auto charges that you landed, that is what you are being charged with 33 years in prison for.
Yeah. But I feel like for my parents, my daddy already 64. So I'm like, damn, I may not come home. Like, what if he passed away or something? I can't tell him, I'm sorry for all the wrongs I done did, all that, and I love you. I can't say that. He already gonna be gone then. Part of me glad I'm locked up because I got my shit together while doing them years. It don't take 30 years for you to get your shit together.
This building we're in right now was actually built in the mid-1990s when people were starting to respond to youth crime with adult consequences, and people were describing kids as juvenile super predators. And so they were building adult-like facilities like this because they thought that was the right way to respond to kids. And what they forgot was they were kids.
There are no violent offenses that are juvenile. You shoot somebody, you're an adult.
Recent statistics may indicate violent crime is declining nationwide, but it's rising among young people.
They should be caged like wild animals because that's what they are. If I had my way, I'd borrow the Ringling Brothers cages and cage these drug pushers and exhibit them so the kids can see scum.
This has reached epidemic proportions.
They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy.
I'm directing the FBI and other investigative agencies to target gangs that involve juveniles in violent crime, and to seek authority to prosecute as adults teenagers who maim and kill like adults.
Hello.
It's good. I'm Michael, man. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
So this is your first time ever being arrested, right? Okay. And you're 13. So what got you here today?
My dad and my mom, they got separated. And then my mom got full custody of me, and I was just staying at my dad's yesterday.
Okay.
And I thought I was able to stay with my dad, but I guess I wasn't.
So Mom said you couldn't go to Dad's tonight? Okay. So then that's when you had the little tussle with the officer and your mom. How long Mom and Dad been having those problems?
For a long time.
A long time? It's all right. Let me get you a tissue. I need one. There's a lot going on, isn't it? Just keep breathing for me, okay?
This 13-year-old experienced his first run-in with the law, pushing a cop during an argument about which parent he was going to stay with. But instead of putting him in a jail cell, the officials here in Toledo, Ohio, are figuring out how they can help him rather than detain him.
Your case is gonna be unofficial. You know what that means?
No.
It's kind of like you don't have a record at court, okay? And then we're gonna talk to you and your mom about some things that might help you. Hi, Dad. How are you? It's a little overwhelming, I know. Yep. We don't want him getting into our system. You know how that is.
I've been trying to get out the system since I started, and I'm still in the system fighting for him. And I told you I don't want you being like me. Ben told you that. How many times? A million times?
It's so important to help at-risk youth at the first signs of trouble, because kids who touch the system at a young age have a greater chance of serving serious time just a few years later. Eric's first contact with the system was at 11 years old, and now at 17, he's facing punishment for armed robbery.
This is the matter of Eric, aggravated robbery, felony of the first degree.
Eric's currently on probation for burglary, F2, and carrying concealed weapon, this being his third time on probation. He was on GPS monitoring. Within 1 week, he committed this current offense.
So, Eric, this is a sad day. For whatever reason that would be, you made the decision. You have the ability to make the changes. You're just going to have to make the changes in a different setting. I am going to commit you to the Department of Youth Services, and I'm going to give you the maximum sentence of a minimum of 3 years up to age 21. Thank you. Good luck.
For Judge Denise Cubbin, sentencing teens like Eric to juvenile prison is a method of last resort. She's presided over this juvenile court for 13 years and has seen firsthand how incarcerating kids not only fails to reduce crime, it has set up generations of young people for a lifetime of failure.
The thought for years was that incarceration would rehabilitate people, but that's not the case. We were sending kids to the Department of Youth Services, that's kids' prison, by leaps and bounds. And they would come home, and what would they do? What they know best: continue to commit offenses because they became unemployable. They perhaps didn't have education to rely on. The reality is we lost a population of young kids. And to what? Our crime rates were continuing to rise. Things weren't any better. If anything, they may have been worse.
Growing up in a violent neighborhood, I saw firsthand how the young people in my community ended up in the system. While some went in for selling drugs, I went in rehab for using.
I've been in my own version of this growing up. Yeah, it sucks. Trust me, though, I wish when I was in this situation, I took it more seriously. I would have saved myself more grief when I went back out. How you feel about the program that you're in here?
Ever since I was young, out there, 7, 8, 9 on the block, selling drugs. To me, if I don't change the way I'm thinking, I'm gonna be somewhere worse than here or probably dead.
In the streets, the same people gonna be there, the same drug, ain't nothing gonna change. And you gotta realize that in order to do something different, like.
Basically, they teach us how you think is how you behave. If I'm thinking I wanna be big and bad, I'm gonna act big and bad. But if I'm thinking like, do the right thing, I'm gonna do the right thing. I realize there's certain things I gotta let go of. And I'm in between what I want to let go of and what I don't. It's a battle within yourself. That's how I feel sometimes, like I'm at war with myself, like I ain't really got no peace at all. And that bothers me.
Chris Dawn, one youth with multiple offenses, was most recently arrested for a firearm charge.
What do you think is the cause for all the violence in your community?
Everybody want to fit in. So it became a trend to be a gangbanger. It became a trend to have all that money. Me and my good friend had a term. If I got regular Oreos, but you got the double stuffed Oreos, we coming to get your Oreos because we need them. So basically that's how we live. We enjoy shooting each other. We enjoy putting up on your street and shooting at you. I've been around it all my life, all my cousins.
You a baby, 16, you're still a baby. I'm trying to tell you, you make 16 like you're an old man, you're still a baby. What are you talking about? I got socks older than 16 years old.
With over 850,000 juvenile arrests a year and 48,000 kids sitting in lockup daily, The U.S. has the highest incarceration rate of kids on Earth. And once these young people are sentenced to juvenile facilities, they've been found to be 38 times more likely to reoffend as adults. For my nephew Dominic, it took one fatal mistake as a teenager to be sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. One day, defending his twin brother, who was being accosted by a gang of teenagers, Dom shot and killed another teen with an illegal firearm.
Let's talk about that one moment in your life. Could you or would you have handled the situation differently?
I've often thought about this whole situation, sometimes until exhaustion. I lay down at night in that cage and I say to myself, what happened? Where'd you go wrong at? But I also think that we don't have to be defined by that one worst moment in our life.
Absolutely.
And for me, that's what this is about.
Wow. What year was this?
Probably is 94, 95. Look how young I look.
You looked young, you were young, you were a baby. How many men that are in here now went into the system as minors, like yourself?
You know what? It's been a lot. Coming to prison, there were a lot of people from our community who were 18, 17. A lot of young men who are going through different challenges, everything from mental health to sexual abuse issues, lack of education, lack of awareness, lack of self-confidence. Their priorities are twisted. They're not making it.
While behind the prison walls, Dominic has decided to pay it forward by counseling and mentoring the other men there. He leads a group called Exodus, where he encourages them to do the work on the inside so they can make a healthy and successful transition. Because of Dom's resolve and his resemblance to the fighter, they lovingly call him Tyson.
I'm one of the adolescents, one of the guys that came in at a very young age, 16. What we are doing down here is changing lives. If it wasn't for Tyson, I wouldn't be who I aspire to be, who I am now. I love because of these men.
Okay. Peace.
Well, how your brothers doing, man?
How's everybody doing? Part of this process is to remember what we've done. Too many children, too many grandchildren have been affected by our conduct. Most of you guys have well over 10 years served in a maximum security prison. How many people came to prison at a very young age? I want you to raise your hand. Think about that. Think about that.
I came to prison when I was 16 years old. I'm 40 years old at the moment. One thing that I value most in this life is my family. Due to my actions, I disgraced them.
I came to jail at 16. A lot of people gave up on me. That kind of messed with my insecurities. It just was me choosing the streets and going the route I wanted.
I became rebellious, and I ran with this rebelliousness to the streets. I turned 13 when I ran with it, thinking that I was man enough to command those streets.
What are gonna be some of the tools that you use that is gonna keep you out of prison?
Basically, finding the root of the problem. Going way back, where everything started.
For many incarcerated people across the country, their troubles with crime, violence in the system started when they were young. The arrest rates for many crimes, like murder, robbery, and car theft, peak in late teenage years and then begin to fall drastically. Dr. Larry Steinberg is a leading psychologist in analyzing juvenile crimes, and what he has found is that this phenomenon is directly connected to adolescent brain development.
So Larry, why do you think we have one of the largest juvenile justice problems in all of the developed countries in the world?
I think there are a couple of reasons. One is that we criminalize normal adolescent behavior. You know, adolescence is a time when kids do a lot of risky and reckless things. There's a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex that's really important for self-control and anticipating the future consequences of your decisions. This brain system isn't completely mature until people are in their early 20s.
Yes.
We know that teenagers already have an easily aroused reward system in their brain. You're more likely to get angry at that age. You're more likely to feel threatened at that age. And we're now understanding that there's this mismatch between this easily aroused part of the brain and a still immature part of your brain. We like to say it's a time when the accelerator is pressed down to the floor, but there's not a good braking system in place. And that's what adolescence is like. We can't reform criminal justice without reforming juvenile justice, because there's almost nobody who's locked up in prison
As an adult.
who wasn't doing
Something stupid when they were young.
When they were young.
Dr. Steinberg has been exploring the psychological differences between teens and adults through a series of experiments on how peer pressure affects impulsive behavior.
The idea here is that the faster you get there, the more money that you're able to get. But along the way, you're going to come to a series of intersections, and at each one, you're going to have to make a decision. And if you keep going, you might beat the light and get there faster, but if the light turns red, you could crash into another car, okay?
This is definite, no way.
Oh, man. What was the difference in the brain activity?
But what we found in this research was that when teenagers are with their friends, their reward centers get activated, especially. But we didn't see any difference for adults. We then developed this theory that the presence of their friends activates their brain's reward centers in ways that makes them pay attention to the potential rewards of a risky choice and to not pay attention to the potential downside.
Being accepted by peers, that also is something that we find in the world of addiction, which is where I come from.
So one of the really interesting discoveries that brain scientists have made is that people who start using early in adolescence are 7 to 10 times more likely to develop an addiction than people who use the same substances in the same amounts but don't start until they're 21. Nobody is saying that we should excuse criminal behavior.
No, sir, not at all.
But we need to respond in ways that are going to help that person return to the community in a better place.
We wanted to see what programs in the U.S. are trying to find a better way. Back in Judge Cubbins' district in Toledo, they are reducing the incarceration numbers by placing each kid in a program that best suits their individual situation. Tyron was detained for carrying a concealed weapon at 16. He is now in a probation program that allows him to continue to live in this community and attend school.
You was locked up?
Hey, I got there catching a gun charge.
Okay. How old were you when you caught the gun charge?
16.
16. And what program are you in right now?
CTC.
CTC. What does those 3 letters stand for?
The Community Treatment Center.
Community Treatment Center. What's your situation there? What are your obligations?
Show up every day, go to school, talk to them about what we be going through and stuff like that. Life skills.
Are there any like dope males in your family or in contact that
good way?
Positive, yeah.
Not that I know of.
Everybody in the game, huh?
Everybody got an addiction. Addicted to the streets. Cause I lost my best friend when I was locked up.
Murder? Yeah. You ever think about doing something stupid?
All the time. I got one of my sons that started off like this, like growing up as a little boy, I was brought up in the church, but everything changed once I seen my brother in the dirt, and ever since then I've been rocking him on the shirt, people begging me to change, but I can't cause this shit hurt. Never had no luck, I be feeling like I'm cursed, going through a lot of pain, you can hear it in my verse, my worst nightmares, me rioting in the hearse. I got some shit real. I got this other one, like this.
We followed Tyron to one of.
Hey everyone, my name's Tristan. So for our project, we decided to look at the first 20 minutes of this video. I wanted to talk about social reaction and label theory because I think this video has a really good understanding of it, especially when they start playing the clips of like the different media the media clips of people basically saying, like, you know, the delinquents are dangerous, you know, they deserve to be locked up, they deserve to be in these facilities, and so on and so forth. So these were all deemed as like misrepresentations, which I think is very fitting, especially with this theory, because if we portray these misrepresentations onto the juvenile delinquent group, then what they'll do is they'll have that thought that, okay, this is what's expected of me, so maybe I'm doing something right, maybe I should keep doing what I'm doing, which, you know, we think that if we give them this kind of expectation, they're gonna do the opposite of what they're expected, which isn't really the case. But they're more likely, when they hear these things, to repeat those offenses, or even go into more serious offenses later down the road, which is another point that the video made as well. This video also outlines what should be done to keep juveniles from staying in the system. So the video talked about different programs and, you know, instead of sentencing these juveniles to these, like, prison-like facilities and stuff like that, they actually try to avoid that when they're young, to get them reacclimated back into society and to encourage them to do better. So in order to do this, the video actually had an example of a juvenile named Eric. He was, you know, in the court system and stuff like that. And the judge actually did sentence him to a 3-year sentence. But he later talked about how, you know, he started off, you know, doing some minor things, some minor theft. And then he started getting into using illegal firearms and stuff like that. So, the video kind of talked about when they go into the court system and are, you know, in front of a judge, the judge won't send them to a facility where they are treated as a delinquent, but they're actually paired with different systems or like facilities, whatever you want to call them, that are actually fitted to their own needs, or their own, like, their own situation. So whatever best suits them and whatever the court or the judge feels like is better for them to be reacclimated into society, that's how they're going to find their sentence, per se. But they do this in order to keep the juveniles from reoffending or moving into more serious offenses. Because a lot of the people that are there, especially when we saw the group kind of talking, they started out in a very light offense, like nothing super serious, and then they escalated to a more serious offense. So that's kind of the social reaction and label theory.
After the 17-year-old kid was arrested for the 4th time after being on probation 3 times, the judge finally put him in a youth detention center with the maximum sentence. She sees this as her last resort because she explains that locking kids up really has no effect on them, and if anything, it only leads them back to jail later on in life after they're no longer juveniles. This only leads them to not being able to get jobs, which then makes them turn back to the streets and committing crimes in order to make money. This is an example of the social disorganization theory because it shows that they have already been sent to jail and they just aren't being rehabilitated when they go to jail. So it just kind of leads them to make more crime in the end. The social disorganization theory says that due to lack of resources in their environment, this leaves juveniles to commit crime in order to maintain their economic needs. So for them, the lack of materials are not being able to acquire jobs in order to make money. And the judge in the video explains that locking these kids up only leads them back to crime because now they have a record, so they're not going to be able to get a job.
So my theory I'm going to explain for this documentary is the biosocial theory. The biosocial theory, which is a new approach to criminology that merged the original idea of genetic predisposition as a predictor of crime with environmental factors to create a modern explanation of criminality. The boy, the 13-year-old boy in the documentary, his name was withheld, but the 13-year-old experienced his first encounter with the law when he pushed a cop during an argument with his mom about which parents he was going to stay with. The biosocial theory is a good theory to apply to this 13-year-old situation because I think his genetic and environmental factors do play a big role in his actions. The 13-year-old boy father has been in the system since he was young and is still trying to get out the system to this day. In family deviance, the child takes after the father's behavior. So for the 13-year-old boy to see his father in the system, he might be trying to take after his father. I think that plays a big role in his life because he is close with his dad. The reason why he got in an altercation with the cop and his mom was because he thought he was going to stay with his dad, but he was staying with his mom, and from that he got mad, and that's when he pushed his mom and pushed the cop. The 13-year-old boy, he watched his parents have issues for years to get separated, which could be another environmental factor for him. The divorce with his parents was a acrimonious divorce where there was a lot of fighting and dysfunction in the house, which could have a negative impact on him. You know, he said he watched his parents grow up fighting, and he for a long time, and seeing his parents fight can negatively impact him. And separation from his father can play a big impact, discussed by Sarah McCanahan, who found negative impacts of household without fathers. And then the 13-year-old shows a little bit of antisocial behavior too, of him being aggressive towards his mom, and police officers getting into a little tussle with his mom pushing an officer. And this is good biosocial theory because there's a lot of environmental factors that affecting his behavior and his actions. And I think because his dad got in trouble, was in and out of the system, and from like what it says, genetic predisposition, his son might be taking after him, taking after his aggression and his behaviors.
Hi, my name is Haley Marston, and after watching our group's video at approximately 8 minutes and 35 seconds into 11 and 30 seconds in, I decided this was a good place for me to try and implement the social learning theory. And the social learning theory is basically a theory of learning process and social behavior, which proposes that the new behaviors can be acquired by observing and imitating others. And this basically, to me, states that like crime is a learned activity. It's learned from the people we're around, whether they be like immediate family members or just people we hang out with on like a daily basis. And there are a couple places in this video that I think this fits well. And the first one is when we are introduced to Kristen. He talks about like how gangbanging was like a big trend in his area, and like that was how people got popular. So like if you wanted to fit in the crowd, you had to basically become like a gangbanger. So basically they learned from watching these other kids get into the fit in around with the crowd. They learned that they had to, in order to fit in, they'd have to commit these crimes like these other kids to, you know, be in the it crowd. And then secondly, again, it is with Kristan. He talks about how when he was growing up, he had been around crime like his whole life. And if you're around crime your whole life, like basically that means like your major role influencers, or basically a lot of influence in your life was based around crime. So, I mean, when that happens, you're gonna learn like how to commit crimes, and crime's just gonna become in the back of your mind all the time if you've grown up like around it. You're gonna notice it, and you're gonna learn how to do these things regardless. And then thirdly would be kind of a far shot one, but it still, like, to me works for this situation. When Eric talks about how he was 7 years old and selling drugs. Well, I mean, when you think about it, no 7-year-old is just going to be out selling drugs just because. I mean, he had to have been in a situation and learned that this is a way to make a living, or like this is a way of life for me. He had to have learned this from watching someone else do it. I mean, he didn't just become the 7-year-old drug dealer, you know? And those are the 3 main reasons I felt that social learning theory could fit into this clip of the video.
One theory that stood out to me in this documentary was the social control theory. And this theory is that when crime occurs, it's when bonds are weak or they're not well established. When some of the juveniles are being interviewed in the beginning and throughout the documentary, they are usually asked if they have someone they look up to, and the majority have no one. And so they turn into the streets where they have strong bonds with criminals. And so what Richmond, California did was that they created a program called the Neighborhood Change Agent. So that's when they find previous criminals who have been incarcerated for gun charges, and they recruit them and call them agents. And so what these agents do, rather than focus on hotspots, they usually focus on people. And so these agents go out into the streets to recruit kids and try to enroll them into an 18-month fellowship. And they usually target young men who solve their conflicts with guns. And so when they're recruiting these young kids, most of them have little to no bonds in their community. So the agents try to create strong bonds with these individuals so they can get out of the juvenile system. Some of the benefits that come with this neighborhood change agent is that the fellowship will give them counseling, social services, a job, and usually a chance to travel if they agree to stay out of trouble. And after 6 months in this program, they will help them form a life map. And that's when the fellowship will pay them up to $1,000 for the remainder of the 9 months. And so another thing is that in 2009, the city saw 45 firearm-related homicides, 180 non-fatal shootings, and that 20 people were responsible for 70% of this criminal activity. Another thing to keep in mind is that the cost to incarcerate a violent youth offender in California is over $200,000 per year and per inmate. And what the program has done, it has helped drive this annual homicide by almost 70% since it started. So it's saving California both money and helping out the youth. And so this program is very important when it comes to social control theory, because they are recruiting kids that have little to no bonds in the community. So they have agents that are trying to create strong bonds with these individuals so they can get out of the juvenile system and not end up dead or back in prison.
Alright, so in the documentary by Vice titled Raised in the System, covering in the first half around the 14-minute and 20-second mark to around 17 minutes and 30-second mark, the narrator, whose name I'm forgetting, talks to Dr. Larry Steinberg about one of the developmental theories, which are basically perspectives of psychological and juvenile justice approaches that focus on an individual's conception of right and wrong that develops over a period of time, typically the young childhood, around early teens, like 11 to 12 to about 15 or 16. Dr. Stein, as the narrator was talking, he shows up an image of
So I don't really know how to start this, so I'm just gonna go for it. My AP said in this Race in the System project, like I went with the strain theory. Strain theory is a theory made by Robert Agnew. It's characterized by one's inability to accomplish socially acceptable goals such as the American dream. And such strains include lack of resources, a failure to achieve a goal, and no positive role models. That's the top 3. I noted is that this would likely go well in the 24:03 and 28-minute time frame with Felicia Pearson, or Pearson, however you pronounce it. I probably butchered that. Whoops. So Felicia, she was born to a crack-addicted mother and raised by foster parents. And she went into the system when she was 15. The strain theory, it goes well here because she didn't have many resources and she didn't have many role models that were positive figures in her life to speak of. So with the lack of role models, she took to the streets and found herself in trouble with the law for committing second-degree murder. The lack of resources also goes well that she grew up surrounded by violence. So she took to looking up to bad role models, or models that you would consider bad, like gangsters and the like, because she didn't have any back at home with either her mother or her foster parents, her biological mother, which led her to ultimately believe that the life of crime was the path that he should be going on, or needed to go on, because she didn't have any positivity in her life, so to speak of.